morning, everyone, and very warm welcome to this presentation on minority rights in Asia. And as we know today that this is, I must first compliment ADRN for taking up this research projects, because this is something very significant, trend across, democracies, not only restricted about Asia. I think across different regions, if you go actually, starting with America and Brazil and name any region, everywhere you have actually a sort of kind of backsliding happening against democracy, and especially the minority rights are actually under attack. And the scales might differ, but every country, almost every democracy, you find in some way or other minorities are actually in the back foot. And majoritarian trend is actually becoming a common kind of nomenclature, which in the previous decade we thought we have overcome, but now they have come back very strongly. Especially the majoritarian nationalism, based on very kind of a monolithic idea of nationhood and racial racism and stuff like that. And nowhere actually that you see more sharper in Asia, especially if you look at a region like South Asia. It is really very sharp and area of real concern, starting with India, the largest democracy, which used to be a sort of role model for many countries in terms of secularism and inclusivity. Today is actually going in opposite direction with rising majoritarianism. And we also find similar trends also in Bangladesh. Of course, it much better placed than in India, but Bangladesh has for pretty long time is witnessing such trends. So also Nepal, and which Pradeep will bring in, which doesn't actually get into the focus or limelight, largely because it's overshadowed by what's happening in India and many other countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh. But Nepal, nonetheless, is also witnessing very sharper deterioration of minority rights. But interesting also case studies we have with Mongolia, which we also often actually don't debate in Asia, in many contexts. So Mr. Ganbath's contribution would actually bring us, and many of us would actually be in fact enlightened by his contribution. And of course, very interesting topic by our colleague from Thailand, Jirawut. He has, I think, taken a very niche subject, LGBT rights. In fact, in India, we have been talking for last 6-7 years a lot actually, with Supreme Court, giving a kind of legal basis. So I think this would be also of great interest for many of us, actually, those who are looking at, those rights, especially these rights in many places are actually, they face not only physical attacks, but all kind of prejudice, stereotyping within the society. So I think a very fantastic 5 cases. So I'll first, as the moderator, I'll take the advantage of running a few slides about India, and then I'll invite the Bangladesh, Nepal, and Mongolia, and then the final will be Thailand. So let me first start the. So basically, I'll be talking about the rising tides of majoritarianism in India for last 8-9 years, and how that has actually impacted the rights of the largest minority, that is Muslim in India. But I'll give a kind of overview of minority rights and what are the provisions. So to give you a sense, what does the Constitution, what are the different constitutional schemes, tell about minorities, and how state institutions and different policies also are geared to protect minority rights. So India is has the largest, after China, largest population. In fact, in just 1 year, actually, India will overtake China in terms of population. So it's one of the most populous democracy. Hindus are in majority, 80%. But it's a very large, diverse minority population as also. Those 20%, because of sheer size of population, are huge. In fact, Muslim population is about 210 million, which is the third largest Muslim, concentration anywhere in the world. So you can easily understand. And then also there are many other religion present apart from Muslim. Christian population, which is about 12 to 13 million. And then we have Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis. It's also mind-boggling diverse country, because those who are talking about this majoritarianism and uniformity and monolithism, they should also understand that this country is like a ocean actually. We have 30 major languages, where there are more than 30 million people each, speak those languages. 300 dialectics, and Aboriginal speaking in their own dialectics, almost more than 400 dialectics among the Aboriginals, the Adivasis. You can easily see there is no probably country that can match the diversity of India. And interestingly, Indian Constitution, when it was framed in the 1950, between 48 to 50, it had a pro-minority bias. It provided a package of bundle of rights to minorities, and especially those who are ethnic minorities like the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, the Dalit, those oppressed caste from the Hindus, were given affirmative action, that reservation or quota in jobs and in education, and also in politics. So this was also very major contribution, which was largely steered by the father of the constitution, that is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So India has a elaborate provision within the constitutions for the minorities. You can easily see that entire part, Indian constitution is into several, parts, 12, 13 parts. But if you look at the part 14, it contains actually elaborate list for minorities, and these are actually rights which are well protected by the constitution and the judiciary. And a lot of these rights are actually fundamental rights. Like, we have, series of fundamental rights which are actually, primary rights actually, and they're constitutionally protected. So, for instance, you can see minorities enjoy cultural and educational rights under Article 29, which is a fundamental rights. And this provides them, they can open any educational institutions, run cultural centers without any kind of state interference on their own. And then there is a significant, fundamental right that is under Article 25, which provides, right to freely profess, practice and propagate religion. Of course, it's subject to public order and morality, but this is a significant, provisions in the constitutions. And as I said, also there is affirmative action for the ethnic minorities, the Dalits, Adivasis, the Aboriginals. They enjoy they have political representation proportion to their population. They have also reservation or affirmative action in job and education. So this is a significant, rights. But and then there are also numerous policies, state policies and central policies, as well as institutions specifically cater to the rights of minorities. And those are there are millions of merit scholarship given to every year to students belonging to minorities. Then concessional educational loans, free coaching, granting aid, to support minority institutions, like universities or colleges. They can get government support. And there are also skill trainings specifically for them. This apart also, there is a statutory body called Minority Commission, which was instituted in 1993, both at the central level as well as every state has a minority commission to look after the interest of minority rights. But in reality, while elaborate laws are there, the constitution has codified, fundamental rights for the minorities of the thing. In reality, when it comes to implementations, I think you'll find that in many countries, not only in India, they are actually not really implemented seriously. And there are weak policing. Also, criminal justice system is also very weak in the sense cases also of violation takes years. So in a sense, this actually is a travesty in many ways. And then many schemes, central schemes and state schemes are not actively implemented. They are there on paper, but if you look at actually, like there are millions of scholarship, but hardly 50% of them are given. So in a sense, these are actually there is wide gap. And resource allocation is also something very critical that is also not given, due attention. Um, and then multiple structural barrier, that comes through the day-to-day politics, where you find trends of majoritarianism. Then there are political parties, they have actually mushroomed and grown actually largely passing minorities, looking at that they like what you find in many countries. In fact, minority bashing is a common trend, and political parties have taken birth basically to corner, discriminate, and exclude minorities from the national politics as well as socio-economic reality. So that's reality something which one can observe in India. I will basically run few slides about, give a kind of quick 5-7 minutes sort of thought about how the Muslims are actually placed today. As I said, the Muslims are, more than 200 million of population. They are almost 14% of the total population. So they're the largest minority. And in terms of population size, they are, third largest in the world. After Indonesia and Pakistan, India Muslims will be third largest. So you can easily understand you can't in fact call Muslims as minority. In fact, they are huge numbers, but numerically you can call them minorities. And they were also erstwhile ruling class, Mughals and sultans and all that thing, which ruled for more than 600-700 years. So most of the Muslims belong to those clans. So in a sense, a lot of them actually are aristocrat and elites. They came when the country got independence. In fact, a lot of them were from aristocracy. But socially, economically, if you look at and educationally look at, they are actually today, they occupy, despite coming from the ruling class, they occupy at the bottom of the society. And if you can easily see, like from the data, 3 to 4% of Muslims, while their population size is 14%, only 3 to 4% Muslims are in elite civil services, police and judiciary, because these are decision-making bodies. So Muslims are very negligible presence there. Educationally and economically, they are the lowest. In fact, they today, if you go by the recent Sachar committee report, they actually occupy, in fact, lowest if you compare with the Dalit and Adivasi, the Aboriginal and the scheduled caste, which used to be really marginalized. They have actually done well in last 2-3 decades. But whereas Muslims cases have only worsened. So in a sense, they are the most marginalized and excluded community in India. But why this Muslim marginalization exclusion, happening in India, being more than 200 million populations? Why this trend actually? So there are 5-6 actually drivers. One is Muslim, their status and their precarious situation today to a great extent is linked to the historical incidents, that long historical trajectories. Before 1947, when India got the independence, there was a massive actually Hindu-Muslim conflicts in the 30s and 1940s. And that led to the partition of the country, very bloody partition of the country, in which more than 2 to 3 million people, got killed from both sides actually, Hindu and Muslims. So this actually, and then the Muslims, a lot of Muslims actually from India left to join the Pakistan, the newly created country. But a lot of Muslims also stayed back. They said that, this is their country and they won't go to Pakistan. But what happened, those who stayed back continuously been facing the, kind of prejudice and, attacks by some of the, extreme Hindu groups who accuse them as the reason for the partition. So that sort of, that grudge, that grudge around the partition is basically vented on Muslims who have nothing to do with, this generation of Muslims have nothing to do with the partition, but they have to pay a price for that. So a lot of stereotyping, prejudice and all that by the Hindu right groups, which are mushroomed actually in last 3-4 decades. And their main agenda is basically to vilify, attack the Muslim communities. So in a sense, Congress party, which occupied the party, being the party of independence, it occupied for several decades, the power, and it tried actually to address some of the problems of Muslim communities. But then what Congress did is largely use these communities for tokenism, for symbolism, making them someone as a president or making someone as a speaker of the house or giving them some, few tickets in the upper house or, making a couple of ministers. Beyond that, actually Muslims political representation never improved. In fact, they never actually got political representation to proportion to their population, that is 14%. So 8 to 9%, and today it has dwindled to 4 to 5%, representation in the parliament and state assemblies. So politically they have been thoroughly marginalized, and but the real actually marginalization started with the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, which started in the 90s. This was the time in which that Babri Mosque, which was demolished in 1991. It was actually led by the movement, Hindu rights, basically the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is in power today. So they claim that this particular mosque is basically a Hindu temple, that is Lord Ram's temple, and this was demolished by the Mughal Emperor Babur. So they wanted to demolish it, and they succeeded by street power and using all kind of way. Since then, actually, the Hindu mobilization has happened around the religion and anti-Muslim clamp. And BJP came to power, in fact, in the late 90s with Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, is largely on majoritarianism and anti-Muslim clamps. But then what we are witnessing since 2014, especially the arrival of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2014 at the national stage, is unbelievable, polarization and attack on Muslims. Now, implication of Hindu majoritarianism. This is the last slide I'll present. As I said, historic marginalization of minorities has actually taken place since 2014, and one can see India's largest state, Uttar Pradesh, where Muslims, there is not a single Muslim ministers. It is one of the largest state in India, almost like 220 million population, in which Muslim are a very sizable chunk, almost like 20% of the population. But today you have a government run by a Hindu monk called Yogi Adityanath. You don't have a single Muslim minister there. So this is, you can easily see the political marginalization that BJP, the right wing, has actually done. And then the stereotyping, stigmatization, demonizing minorities, especially the Muslim, has gone up. If any Muslim raises something, then the usual is go to Pakistan, you leave the country. All kind of things are happening. What you also witness in America, like about the minorities or Asians, during the Trump administrations. Then growing intolerance, the barrage of new laws have come up in especially BJP ruled states, anti-conversion laws, ban on cow slaughter, and beef ban. That has actually affected Muslims. In fact, not only their food consumption, but also in terms of their the vocation. Millions of Muslims used to actually depend on those industry which based on cow slaughters and beef ban. So that has actually affected the community, because these laws are targeting particular community. Then there is also growing trends of communal attacks against Muslims in the recent past. In fact, we had series of communal riots. Actually, smaller riot took place in many states during the Hindu festival. And then there is also collapse of trust and inter-community relations. Finally, in terms of checking it, I think I mean, this is the last slide. In terms of checking, there are no actually major kind of opposition coming from the opposition parties or even the judiciary. On the other hand, what has happened is that BJP doesn't want to declare India as a sort of Hindu version of Pakistan, like as a theocratic state of Hindu. But what they're doing is actually they are actually amending the constitutions or skirting the constitution and legal issue to make different kind of laws. For instance, there are a spate of Muslim anti-Muslim legislation have come up in last few years. They removed the Article 370, that controversial act which had given a special right to India's only Muslim state, that is Jammu and Kashmir. They removed that in 2019. They brought a new law, actually Citizens Amendment Act in 2019, that led to massive protest across the country by the Muslims, which discriminates Muslims living in India about citizenship. And then there are also issues like they passed something called National Register for Citizens, in which you have to show the proof of citizenship. which actually is largely intended to the Bangladeshi migrants, but this is also going to affect most of the Muslims because documentation is very poor in this country. Then they passed the law against triple talaq in 2019. Laws against religious conversations have been also passed in many BJP states. So I will say that India's situation is very dire, and Muslims today are facing unprecedented kind of threats and attacks. And their identity is being questioned, their citizenship being challenged, and today the situation is in a dire state, I would say. So I'll close here. Uh, should we have a discussion, or should we go to the next presentation and they have the discussion towards the end? What do you say? Anybody? Should we have any discussion on my presentation, or should we go for the next presentation and finish all the presentation? Maybe towards the end we have a discussion. Okay.
Good idea.
Okay. So I'll stop my presentation now. I'll invite Sahin. Yes, Sahin Anam from the very prominent Bangladeshi NGOs, and Mansoor Janu Foundation has been doing a lot of work actually, whatever I have actually acquired today. So she has a.
I just want to start with that the in South Asia, the dominant religion for centuries have been Hinduism, but then of course Buddhism, uh, uh, and then the Afghans, Iraqis, Turks, they all migrated to the subcontinent and came migrated in the sense that there was attacks and invasion, and many Hindus converted to Islam. So there was in the subcontinent, Islam came through invasion, but it also came through a lot of trade from Saudi Arabia, from the Middle East, and other places. India and Pakistan, as Niranjan said, that in 1947, after 200 years of British rule, was divided into India and Bangla, and in 1971, uh, Pakistan was divided into Pakistan and Bangladesh after a bitter war in 1971. And that was also actually based a lot on religious politics and the oppression of the Bengalis who formed the East Pakistan, part of Pakistan, on not being able to live and kind of follow their own cultural, political, and so Bangladesh, right after independence, emerged as a secular polity. So our constitution is very clear that everybody has equal rights. And as such, the minorities in Bangladesh did not get any separate provision because it was assumed that everybody is Bangladeshi, and we don't really talk about that minorities are different. However, there has been an issue with our ethnic population who don't have constitutional recognition, and they have been kind of, claiming constitutional recognition because everybody as Bangladeshi in our constitution. That although Bangladesh claims to be a country of religious ethnic harmony, we obviously have certain problems. Although the constitution guarantees equal rights, it has not been followed up with proper policies and systems and structures in place in order to give minorities all the rights, the services, and and all the entitlement of the state. Uh, Religious radicalism in Bangladesh, unfortunately, has grown in the last 20 years. Globalization, social media, religious extremism, and some incidents happening in other parts of the world, like in Palestine, the oppression of Muslim, the Palestinians. Also, recently, what has been happening in India is also affecting us, and we are very kind of nervous and concerned that this will on atrocities on Hindus, especially on Hindus in Bangladesh. Um, uh, there has been in recent years many attacks on minorities, especially not in really overt killing and murdering like riot, but taking over property of Hindus, which they are like soft target, and there are vested interest groups who will take advantage of a certain situation and take over the property of Hindus. Uh, the local politics is also involved. Army League is the most biggest party, and there are we don't have a credible opposition, and there are rivalry for resources, like as I said, land grabbing, uh, and all these things which oppresses our Hindu minority population and makes them feel that they are really not equal citizens. That is the most, I would say, damaging thing. When we have a lot of dialogue with our Hindu, I have colleagues or friends, and they say that it's not that we are being oppressed from the state. There's no state sponsored kind of oppression on minority. I must say that it is more social, it is more economical, it is more to do with attitude that the state is really not addressing in the way it should. Uh, we have had, and I don't want to go into detail on this slide because it talks of particular incidents, and I'm not very happy to do that. But there has been, as I said, a number of attacks on minority, and I will just name one, that in the last Durga Puja, let me outline in the beginning that Durga Puja is a huge celebration in Bangladesh. It is like a big festival, but slowly over the years there beginning to be opposition for such kind of a huge celebration by the more progressive groups. But there has been human rights violation against indigenous people. There are uh, and the most uh, damaging one is using rumors, social media, you know, to uh, kind of highlight some false news, and then the fundamentalist group, they go and attack the Hindu population. That has been happening consistently over the last few years, and we are very concerned about that. The Facebook, the social media is used in very negative way. For example, somebody put on Facebook that the Quran has been found in a temple. So the people of that area who are looking for a chance to take over property of the Hindus, they have gone and attacked them. Things like this has been happening, and our problem is that the state is not doing anything on time to prevent it. When an atrocity on Hindus happen, the police is very prompt, the government is very prompt, they will go and make the arrest. But nothing much is done for prevention of this kind of incident. That is the most concerning part for us. And now, before I talk about this, I want to talk a little bit about our ethnic minority population. Overall, 90% are minority. Out of this 10%, 8.5% are Hindus, and 1.5% are others, like, for example, Christians, Buddhists, and our ethnic minority population. Many of them live in the Chittagong hill tracts in the hills. They're called the Jummo. Some are plain. The government that is used, because if government recognizes Adivasi as essential state, position is that they are one of the main challenges for infringement of minority rights in Bangladesh, as I said, has been very weak response of the state. Uh, uh, can you go? Yes, very weak response was there. Although their professed policy is oppression on minority, yet, as I said, it is not followed up properly to make sure that it doesn't happen. Then, if it does happen, there is political indemnity. Like, for example, if people in high level positions or powerful groups are doing it, then nothing is done to them. Then, of course, as I said, land grabbing is one of the losing land for the minority population is one of the big challenge for them. And then I already said propaganda, rumors propagated by vested interest group, and most importantly, prolonged justice system, which Niranjan also mentioned, also infringes on minority rights. The system of getting justice is too long. But then I must say that the system of getting justice for ordinary people, whether they are minorities or not, is also prolonged and very, very difficult. So there are certain, as I said, there are protection, systems in place. For example, the Constitution guarantees equal rights and zero tolerance for offenses against minority. The government routinely sets up investigation committees, commissions, and vows to punish culprits. And we have a National Human Rights Commission, and they regularly monitor incidents of attacks. The civil society initiatives, and it is quite elaborate, but there are a number of civil society organizations. And Bangladesh boasts of a very strong civil society group or movement, and they are constantly monitoring and badgering the government to of any rights violation, and it is brought to the attention of the government. Yeah, there are there okay, so in finally I've given some recommendation, and I think my time is also over, that it is very important, socially, to promote and uphold the principle of secularism and a culture of pluralism, um, which is not so much in the dialogue as it should be. Incidents of violence should be handled more strongly. So when it happens, that justice should be swift, and the perpetrators should be punished immediately. One of the things I feel very strongly, that the education system and curriculum should be revised, looked into, to teach these values of diversity, social cohesion, promoting social harmony and peace among young children. And that is not happening. And that is why we are concerned that a whole generation of children will grow up not not immersed in these values of celebrating diversity or social harmony. And then there should be very sincere dialogues and discussions to address these issues of diversity, cultural, social, political, religious light groups, acceptance of difference of opinion and differences. The problem is that in Bangladesh, there is very little appetite for dissent, for coming up with different views and also accepting differences. So these are some of the things. As the minority are a group, and I feel very strongly, and I must say here, and it has been a part of our work, that the majority population have a responsibility to protect the rights of the minority. And unless there are more number of people standing up for the rights of minorities, I think that it will be very difficult to address it only through laws and policies. I would like to end here. Thank you.
Sain, I think very well put. And the last the sentence you said is, I think, very critical to the protection of minority rights. That is, the majority community has to take that moral, ethical responsibility to protect the minorities, and unless that sort of democratic sense and that that ability to hear also something from the other side, that dissent, what you said, is the core of what we called libertarian principle, that that tolerance, that plurality is hallmark of any diverse society. And once that starts breaking, what we are witnessing in India and Bangladesh and many other countries, then ultimately, even if you have constitutions, you have rights enumerated, you have judiciary, you have police, everything, all the instruments, they will not be of any great help, because the majority community is also in some way or other silently, supporting, or in some way or other showing no great interest to, stand up and say, no, this cannot be. So I think that's where I think a lot of these things, minority rights are today at across, sections. Now, without any delay, I'll invite Pradeep. Pradeep Perrier, who has been running Samta Foundation and has been one of the very active, very, very proactive way in the subcontinent. I see many of his posts, through Facebook and other, and also some of his activities of his foundation. He's doing pioneering work, and we would like to hear about the Dalit rights in Nepal. Over to you, Pradeep.
Thank you so much, Niraj. I think this is a really important topic, and an important time we're discussing about it. Thank you so much, East Asia Institute, for hosting this conversation. Let me begin about the Nepal current situation of Dalit, but I'll talk a larger perspective also. So Nepali society tracked through the caste-based ideology systems, maybe in South Asia, and structure. However, the discrimination, indignities, and inequalities beared by the caste system get swept under the carpet or soothed by those in power. The dominant caste groups, the caste-based hierarchy excluded the lower caste categories from equal inclusive representation and access to decision making and justice, and has jeopardized their lives by exploiting their human rights, labor, and skills. So that's kind of situation right now. Here, we have a National Dalit Commission define Dalit as those community who, by virtue of atrocities of caste-based discrimination and untouchability, are most backward in social, economic, educational, political, and religious fields, and deprive of human dignity and social justice. The worldwide, if we talk about the worldwide Dalit population, Dalit make of 36 million, and including the 2000 census, Dalits in Nepal comprise 13.6% of the total population, involving 7 Dalit Hill Dalit caste groups and 19 Madhesi Dalit caste groups. Of them, 51% are women. So most of the Dalits lives in India. So in Nepal, there is only 13.6% of the population. So caste-based discrimination and untouchability continue to be deeply entrenched in Nepalese society, India, and other part of the South Asia, and now this travel to other part of the world as well. Dalits are still subject to the worst form of the discrimination. They are subject to endless humiliation and injustice in their social, culture, economic, and administrative and political lives. Assault, rape, and murder, and deny access and place of worship, common water sources, education, and dignified jobs. In addition, Dalit women, who constitute half of the Dalit population, face intersectional and threefold discrimination: class, gender, and caste. So this is one of the important conversations we need to talk about it, but this is not happening so far. So in Nepal, status of protection of Dalit rights in Nepal, let me talk about the education in Nepal, status of Dalit. According to 2011 census, average literacy rate in Nepal is 65.97%, with 75.2% for male and 57.53% for female. The little literacy rate 6 year and above is 52.4% compared to the national average of 65.9% and 35.5% for Madhesi Dalit. Literacy rate of Dalit women are 45.5%, while women from Musar and Dom community are at the bottom with 17.4% and 17.9% literacy rates, respectively. It's really, really low, especially if we talk about Musar and Dom community in the flatland, especially we call Pradesh. So that kind of situation we have. So life expectancy also does fall behind in all major health indicators. For example, on mortality rate, the group is 90 deaths for 1,000 live births compared with an all Nepal level of 68 only. So Nepal has immunization coverage of 83%, whereas immunization rate for Dalits are 13 point below the average. The proportion of the underweight children is highest among Madhesi Dalit, more than 36.3%, and Hill Dalits 33.9%. Here we need to understand that there is a totally different between Hill Dalits and Madhesi Dalits. Within the Dalit also there is a Madhesi Dalit are more deprived and backward situation. This clearly indicate that there are a problem with access to nutrition food, Dalit groups among others. Many Dalit women suffer from uterus collapse in the rural areas, especially in the village. Their morbidity rates are really high. Child marriage, early pregnancy, and reproductive health issues are other problems faced by Dalit women in Nepal. So if we talk about the poverty situation, Dalit comprise the poorest community in Nepal, especially the Dalit doesn't have a land, housing, and when they don't have a land, there's a lot of issues about the citizenship also. So in terms of poverty measures, income, consumption, and human development, around 42% of Dalit live below the poverty line. 43.6% of Hill Dalit and 8.2% of Tarai Dalit, whereas the national poverty rate is 25.2% only. While the immediate causes of this gap are limited employment opportunity due to occupation, specialization, preventing Dalit from accessing well-paid jobs, as well as lack of access to quality education and land that perpetuates poverty from one generation of Dalits to the next generation. And the persistence of social discrimination is the overarching factor of explaining this situation. And Dalits mostly they are not getting the job. Those who get the jobs, that's really, really only leverage job. And there is we have one Bali Garib, that's especially Dalit have a traditional occupation, for example, shoemaking, tailoring, and um, uh, there's jewelry work. So this kind of work they're doing, but they're not getting enough pay. That kind of situation also exists. So let me talk about this. Is one of the important issues here in Nepal and South Asia. So atrocity against Dalit is one of the really really important issues we need to discuss in this time. So although untouchability was declared illegal more than a decade in Nepal, caste-based discrimination persists across the country, with lingering prejudice continuing to cause significant violence within Nepali society. The stories of Navraj Bike, Angira Pasi, Manas Sarki, Ajit Mizar, Samdana Kami, Manuveri Suna, there is many stories, just few represented stories of Dalit who are systemically marginalized and persecuted every day through contemporary caste hierarchy. Many stories remain unreported and untold. So I mentioned this name. They are the kill in the name of the caste. So recently, I'll share one story. Recently, there is a Sundar Harijan, a Dalit youth as 20, was found dead hanging in a toilet at one of the district called Rorpa prison on 18 May 2022. He was just 17 years and 3 months old when he was arrested illegally for mobile phone theft on 2nd September 2019. The court sentenced him to 1 year jail imprisonment. It's interesting that he was actually child that time when this court sentenced him to 1 year jail. Very interestingly, his death leave behind a trail of mystery, one of the big mystery in now in Nepal. The police records show that he was serving imprisonment for someone else's crime. His identity was swiped with Vijay Bikram Shah, one of the charge. There's a Vijay Bikram Shah arrested from Nepal on charge of extortion and illegal arms possession. The police catch him on 7th March 2018 with a pistol, 5 mobile phone, and 15 SIM cards. The court sent him behind bars for 5 years. Sundar Harijan's death in prison raises serious questions about human rights violation in Nepal, particularly for Dalits, one of the most marginalized and excluded communities. According to the Act relating to children, 2018, while detained as a minor, Harijan had the right to juvenile prosecution procedure. The court verdict to imprison him is unlawful and violates existing legal provision. But that happened, and he died in prison. So we don't know about the reality so far. The court
Move
order
to the main issues because we don't have much time. Move to the main issues. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of situation we have right now. So in pandemic, also there is a lot of issues raises in pandemic time. There is a relief package distribution also not fear. So that kind of issues with us. So I'm going to be fast. How much minutes? 2-3 minutes I have.
3 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so we have a legal instrument for the protection of Dalit rights in Nepal. So the new Nepali constitution is one of the biggest achievements for Dalits and Dalit movement. Dalit rights are provisioned as fundamental rights. In particular, Article 24 and 40 guaranteed fundamental rights, including education, health, and land. But that's not in implementation. That's one of the major problems with us. So Nepal has enacted the caste-based and other social discrimination and Untouchability Offence and Punishment Act 2011 that criminalizes all form of caste-based discrimination, but that's a Sundar Harijan case happened. So this kind of situation we have. Let me share my conclusion remarks here. So to address all these challenges, there is a need to amend the present constitution to ensure the Dalit rights. Additionally, the recent verdict of the Supreme Court right petition filed by Advocate Prakash Nepali needs to be properly implemented. Whatever I talk about, whatever we have in the Constitution, even in the fundamental right, but that's not in implementation because Dalit are not in the educative body, so they are not in the implementation body. So those who are in the implementation body, they are not very serious about the Dalit and marginalized issues. That's the fundamental problem. The structure, budget, plans, and revision, as well as the implementation of the laws, should be ensured as instructed by the directive order. So recently, we have a directive order from Supreme Court because one of the advocates put the file because that's even the fundamental right is not implementing right now. So additionally, it needs to be proportional representative of Dalits in minorities in the state bodies, especially in the parliament. There is not much Dalit representation. Even cabinet, there is not much Dalit representation. Even we have 750 local government, and recently we had an election. There's a must only 1% of Dalit representation in the local level bodies. Those bodies are the one of the bodies who work closely with people, local people. So, but we don't have enough representation in local bodies also, especially the bureaucracy and law enforcement agency like the Nepal police and government lawyer. there's a really less Dalit representation. In nutshell, awareness need to be conducted to enable the Dalit and minority to claim their rights. So we need to do three things, especially awareness. So there is a need to be a lot of awareness. So access to resources and implementation of the laws and policies and programs. If we can ensure these three things, that we can protect the minority rights. Let me conclude with this note. Thank you for the listening.
Thank you, Pradeep. Very clear, crisp presentation and kind of bird's eye view in 15 minutes. Not easy topic, but I think most of the key points, came out very clearly. And the last point about those three things that you recommended, I think I see in every country that implementation is the key, and that's where I think most countries are missing. Whether it's India, Bangladesh, or Nepal, we have actually enacted a number of laws, policies, programs, everything, but most of them are on paper. The weak state capacity, especially, what we see also the weak judiciary, that enforcement agencies to maintain those rights are actually something, probably needs a real kind of strengthening. And that's where I think we have a common kind of, story. Now, without further delay, I'll invite Mr. Damba Ganbat, our colleague from Mongolia. He's the chairman of the board Academy of Political Education in Mongolia, and that political education, I think that word actually is very key, in fact, for the minority rights, because awareness, that education, and they know that minorities should know actually that they have been neglected or exploited. What Pradeep made, that observation is very key, because without that, how much of state preparation, all that will go waste actually. So they have to also work enough. So over to you, Mr. Ganbat, and 15 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon from Mongolia. And actually, as I wrote in emails, that we today and this week actually is a National Day of Mongolia, which is the biggest holiday. So happy National Day to all of you. The paper was prepared by Ms. Toya and myself. And, I'm going to present the paper on behalf of the Academy of Political Education. So, as all of you know, the Mongolia is located on the northern part, northeastern part of Asia, which is you are guys mainly from the southern part. Mongolia is in the northern part, and we have only two giant neighbors, Russia and China. And Mongolia covers an area of almost 1.6 million square kilometers, with a population of only 3.5 million. In compare with your country, India, it's a very number. And it makes the world's most sparsely populated nation. So 100 years ago, in the beginning of 20th century, Mongolian population was only 700,000 only. So now it's growing. And Ulaanbaatar is the capital city. It's the largest city, and is home to roughly half of the country's population. The Mongols constitute one of the principal ethnographic divisions of Asian peoples. The traditional homeland is centered in Mongolia, a vast plateau in Central Asia. Physical anthropologists in the early 19th century introduced the terms Mongol and Mongolian is descriptive of racial type, even though the Mongols exhibited a wide range of physical characteristics. Today, the Mongols are recognized as a group of peoples bound together by a common language and a common nomadic tradition. The Mongols have always been nomads, and traditional society in Mongolia was based on blood relationships traced through the common male ancestor who gave his name to the clan. Evidence exists of a more ancient system of matrilineal descent. Marriage between members of the same clan was forbidden, giving rise to complicated marriage alliances among the clans. As clans grew, the most successful families tended to arrogate to themselves claims to ancestry and territory. Weak clans fell to a subordinate but not servile status. They owned their own cattle and had their own headmen, but paid tribute to the ruling clan and moved, camped, pastured, and fought under its orders. And today's approximately 30% of the population is nomadic or semi-nomadic, and horse culture remains integral. Some points on the ethnic background, language, and religion. Actually, the Mongols, in compared with your countries, Mongols are ethnically quite homogeneous. There are 24 ethnic groups, and among them, we call the Half, make up the majority and comprise over 85% of the population. Half are the dominant ethnic group in Mongolia. And half people see themselves as the direct ancestors of Genghis Khan, and therefore the true standard bearers of authentic Mongolian culture. They uphold half traditions and beliefs as the official Mongol traditions. Half Mongol is the official language of the nation, since all other Mongol languages are dialects of this common tongue. Half are extremely proud of their heritage and encourage the preservation and continuation of traditional Mongol, by which they mean half culture. For a long time, this led the half who dominate Mongolian politics to shut off Mongolia from outside influences. Today, however, Mongolia is much more open and has even permitted entry of Christianity into a nation that traditionally practices Buddhism. Much of the remainder consists of Turkic-speaking peoples, mainly Kazakhs, some Tuva, and few Tsatan, who live mostly in the western and the northern parts of the country. There are very small numbers of Russians and Chinese, who are found mainly in the cities and towns. Except for the Kazakh and Tuva minority groups residing in Western Mongolia, all ethnic groups speak Mongolian dialects that are comprehensible to speakers of half and to each other. Half Mongolian is official national language and is used at all levels of administration, and is the language of instruction in most schools and is used in all national exams. Besides the Tsatan, the Kazakh, and Tuva, cultural differences among ethnic groups are minor. The majority of Mongolia's ethnic groups share similar customs, traditions, and systems of production as the half. Ethnicity is mainly revealed in distinct clothing styles and ways of preparing some person's food, as well as in musical and oral traditions. Ethnic distinctions can thus be qualified as relatively minor, although some groups may have a stronger sense of their own identity than others. This is the case for the nationally nomadic reindeerding Tsatan people in the north. The Kazakhs, who have stronger cultural differences added to language and religious distinctions. Kazakh language and Islam and the Tuvas. However, Kazakh and Tuva livelihoods are not significantly different from those of the Mongol subgroups. Only the Satan, because they are mainly reindeer herders, are characterized by a specific system of production. Although Mongolia has a fair amount of ethnic group diversity, this has not led to major problems. The Khalq people are generally not challenged in their claims to represent, true Mongol culture, or in their widespread control that simply comes from having much greater numbers. This doesn't mean, however, that things are always perfect. Every now and then, one of the ethnic minority groups will bring their lack of political representation into national politics, or will question decisions made by the government for Mongolia's future. However, while racial tension does exist in these cases, the disputes are almost always resolved peacefully. The official language of Mongolia is Mongolian and is spoken by more than 95% of the population. The government has given increased attention to respecting and protecting the languages and cultural rights of Kazakhs, Tuvas, and other minorities. The vast majority of population speaks Mongolian. In western part of country, where mainly the Kazakh and Tuva live, both Turkish languages are also spoken. And Mongolian Sign Language is the principal language of the Deaf community. The Mongols originally followed shamanistic practices, but over time they broadly adopted Tibetan Buddhism, Lamaism. The new regime installed in 1921, 100 years ago, sought to replace feudal and religious structures with socialist and secular forms. During especially the 30s, the ruling Communist Party, which espoused atheism, destroyed or closed almost every monastery, confiscated their livestock and land holdings, induced large numbers of monks to renounce religious life, and repressed and killed those who resisted. The end of one-party communist rule in 1990s allowed for the popular resurgence of Buddhism, the rebuilding of ruined monasteries and temples, and the rebirth of the religious vocation. Buddhists, predominantly of the school headed by the Dalai Lama, constitute nearly 1/3 of the Mongolians who actively profess religious beliefs. According to the last 2020 national census, among Mongolians aged 15 and above, around 50% were Buddhists, while around 40% were non-religious. So it means the rest, a relatively small number of Muslims who are found mostly in the western part of the country, are nearly all Kazakhs. And much smaller community of Christians live mainly in the capital. A significant proportion of the people are atheistic or non-religious. For instance, of the Kazakhs in Mongolia, around 82% practice Islam, while 27% of Tuvans and 60% of Satan people practice shamanism. So, and also, of course, there are some issues on which we should pay attention. So, minority-related legislation. The rights of ethnic minorities are guaranteed by the Constitution of Mongolia of 1992. It's the first ever democratic constitution of Mongols, which states, I quote, No person may be discriminated on the basis of ethnic origin, language, race, age, sex, social origin or status, poverty, occupation or post, religion, opinion or education. The Constitution also protects the right of ethnic minorities to practice their own culture and, of course, use their own language, guaranteeing, I quote, the right of national minorities of other tongues to use their native languages in education and communication and in the pursuit of cultural, artistic, and scientific activities. And also the government of Mongolia has in recent years adopted some laws such as a labor law, criminal code, which guarantee equality among ethnic groups. So at last, I would like to share some concerning issues. So in the early 2010, international organizations, and especially United Nations Special Reporter reports, reports include the following comments and concerns regarding the minority rights protection. For instance, lack of appropriate policies to address challenges for ethnic minorities to ensure the interests, including poverty, unemployment, and lack of access to education in their mother tongue. Compared to the national average, fewer people from Kazakh, Tuva, and Tsar minorities have access to primary, general, and higher education. So, in the last years, Mongolia has enshrined the law on education, the law on primary and secondary education, and the law on the Mongolian language in the constitution to ensure and protect the rights of ethnic minorities, including the right to education and the right to mother tongue education. One example, Article 8 of the Constitution of Mongolia states that the Mongolian language is the official language of the state and stipulates that Section 1 of this article shall not affect the right of national minorities to use their native languages in education. And at the end, I would like to just say a few words regarding on which we should pay attention in the coming future.
Can you sum up in 1 or 2 minutes, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Running out of time, yeah, please.
Thank you. So based on some research conducted by the NGOs, following concerns we highlighted in our paper. In Mongolia, there are currently no didactic or optimal curricula that support children of ethnic minorities with different cultures and languages and learning multiple languages. No data specific to children from ethnic minorities and other language and culture groups was collected to evaluate their school enrollment and academic achievements. There is also a lack of effort to educate bilingual and multilingual teachers and improve their teaching skills to make education accessible for ethnic minorities. So one sentence. In comparison with your countries, with the heterogeneous society, we have fewer problems, but still we have some concerns, mainly related to the educational right and get more high education level for the minorities which I mentioned as Kazakh, Tuva. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think a very cogent summary of the kind of developments in Mongolia in last more than a decade. I think you also brought out what's happening in terms of the constitutional mechanism and legal mechanism to ensure the religious ethnic minorities, especially the Kazakh, Tuva, and many other, they are sort of also the native groups, their language, the protection, their education, and opening the door for access. I think plenty of things are happening, but also there are gaps, like every other country, and there are weak implementations. So those are actually areas where actually needs more, but at least we're not witnessing, kind of majoritarianism and, the sort of backsliding that we are witnessing in many other democracies. So in that sense, at least you are in safer terrain than many countries. Now, without any further delay, so I invite Dr. Jiraud for his presentation, and this is one of the very interesting topic that we would like to hear about LGBT rights. Something, Thailand opens up a kind of I would say it's like, avenue, and which many other countries are looking at Thailand as an excellent example. What is possible even with a kind of polarized society we live in. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Niranjan, and thank you, the East Asian Institute, for organizing this event. So, I'm going to be quite different here because I'm going to present a sort of the rights for minorities, but in a different perspective. It's for the LGBT community. The reasons I'm choosing this topic, because it has been quite in recent debate for over the past 10 or 20 years here in Thailand about the equal rights for the LGBT community here in Thailand. And for me, what is interesting about this topic is that it's also open up the flaw in the Thai legal systems, and also the flaws in the Thai human rights system as a whole, because even though the Thai constitution, regardless of which constitutions we are talking about, for the past 90 years, for your informations, we have had about 20 constitutions already. But in every version of our constitutions, it's always dictate that human dignity, rights, liberties, and equality of the people shall be protected. The Thai people shall enjoy equal protection under the constitutions. But the constitution may have changed. We have 20, as I mentioned. But the thing is that the thing that hasn't changed much for the last 100 years or 150 years is the Thai law, which developed during the colonialisms of South of Asia, as a mean to avoid being colonized by the Western power. So the Siamese government and later the Thai government, they tried to reform their legal system from the traditional legal system to a modern legal systems that we know it. But because of that, it still got the colonial hangover, and also it still have some assumption flaws that prevent further developments in the human rights and the rights of the minorities, regardless whether in terms of gender or in terms of linguistic or ethnicities. So as you may see from my presentation, these are their photos, from the last centuries, and they are showing Thai men and Thai women, who has been cross-dressing and enjoying the intimacies of the same sex. But traditionally, this was not considered to be a taboo, unless it is interfered with the state, which I will mentioned earlier. But since the introductions of the colonial or the modern legal systems, it has somehow has been criminalized and then decriminalized, but again, it's still excluded the LGBT communities from some basic rights that they want. For instance, the rights to love, the rights to start a family, the rights for adoptions together. So that is why since 2012, the Thai LGBT community has been fighting for the right to marry, to allow them to start a family, to adoptions, and to inherit and to decide the hospitalizations and how to deal with the death of their loved one. So and because of this fight to legalize same-sex marriage, and it has resulted in public debates on minority rights as well. So to provide you with the brief history of LGBT advocacy in Thailand, so in the pre-colonial Thai society or Siamese society, well, the idea of gender was relatively androgynous. So people were not regarded as their for their sexual behavior or gender, and what happened in their private life remain private, and unless they are interfere with the state. For example, during the 19th centuries, there were two cases that about gay relationships. One is about female and female relationships within the royal court, but it was not because of the criminalizations of such relationship, but because of it was a dispute of inheritance, for examples, or at the same and at the same times, one there was a criminalizations of a gay behavior, the male loving male behavior, but not because of it was an act of indecency, but because it was considered a treason, for example. But with the arrival of colonial norms and and the westernized concept of virtues and sexualities, and that was when you know, gay sex or gay marriage, you know, become you know, criminalized. The first legal bills, you know, that came in 1917, that was considered, you know, the turning point of, you know, the you know, the gender politics, you know, in Thailand, because, you know, it was when gender identity and, you know, and sexuality, you know, becomes, you know, the same thing and becomes, you know, the matter of the states. And it was the first time that, you know, a person's identity was officially recognized by the gender of one birth. So, you know, when one was born, one has to register, you know, what sex or what gender one is or one was, and that cannot, you know, be changed. Yeah, and but you know, but even then, you know, the sexual behavior, that is the same sex relationships were not, you know, were not criminalized, but again, you know, after the Second World War, there was a new law, you know, came out to decriminalize the, you know, the consensual, you know, sodomy, or the consensual and same-sex relationship, which was not, you know, criminalized, you know, in the first place, but it is an example, you know, of how, you know, the Thai states were prepared, you know, to reform, you know, their legal systems to comply with the idea, the Western idea of what is human rights or what should be done, you know, in legal matters. But in general, you know, for the past, you know, 100 years, the, you know, LGBT, you know, advocacy in Thailand, you know, hasn't developed much. You know, even though, you know, in the 1980s and in the 1960s and 1970s, you know, there were, you know, flourishing, you know, LGBT community here, you know, in Thailand, but you know, no one then, you know, was concerned about LGBT rights or advocacy, you know, for equal rights, you know, for the LGBT communities, you know, and that, you know, because of, you know, the Thai societies were quite, you know, relaxed in this matter. So the Thai LGBT communities, you know, enjoyed quite a comfortable level of social space and freedom to you know, to live their life. So, and that is why, you know, there was no you know, advocacy groups or political unions, you know, developed, you know, during that time. The official LGBT movement in Thailand, you know, started, you know, in the 1980s with, you know, the AIDS, you know, epidemic, and, you know, because, you know, back then when AIDS arrived, you know, in here in Thailand, it was banned as homosexual or sinner's disease. It is because, you know, you have done something, you know, bad in the past life. And that's why, you know, you got HIV or AIDS, you know, in this life. You know, that was how people, you know, believed, you know, back then. And for that matters, you know, LGBT communities or, you know, people with HIV, especially, you know, within the LGBT communities, were were forbid, so sort of, were not allowed to have access in the universal health care, and the AIDS research were underfunded because it was considered a disease for very small groups, and also a disease, the disease for sinners. So that's why the Rainbow Sky Association of Thailand was founded to fight for the rights, for the legal rights for the LGBT community, and the access of healthcare. And that was
just a second. Yeah, can you wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes, because we are already wasted the time. 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes. Please
okay.
try to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So that's why when we when it started. So when forward back to 2012. And that is when the debates on LGBT marriage rights came about, and it was divided into, although it was quite advanced in that time, but it was divided into two camps, because because the government introduced a new marriage civil partnership bills, just for the LGBT community, but for different groups, they just want the overall law legal system reformed here in Thailand to allow LGBT community to access the equal rights for in terms of pensions, and in terms of inheritance. So the fight has been going on for the past 10 years, and it was just until 2 weeks ago that both of the civil partnership bills and also the marriage equality bills has been passed by the parliament for the first reading, but still it still have to go to the several process until until both bills can be announced, and it may take years or even decades. But again, it has opened up the wound within the Thai legal systems. One is that the Thai legal system, especially in terms of minority rights, the Thai law still dominated or informed by this conservative heterosexual and and assumptions of majoritarianisms. What is Thai? What is described as Thai? Are we Buddhist, or are we Muslim, or are we anything, or are we a secular society? And also the Thai attitude toward laws and law reforms, that they don't want to reform anything, but they just want to pass a new law. And also the third key challenge is also the failure of policymakers, because of the law. This bill has been passed 2 weeks ago, but the four Muslim-dominated provinces in the south of Thailand have been asked to be exempted from this bill, because they are allowed to practice their Sharia law as well. But they ask to be exempted from this bill, or they will draft a new bill to for themselves. So so this is a failure, because they are policy makers, but they're still using that personal, religious, and moral worldview to inform their duties, to protect their civil rights, and it's also open up the wound of the not just LGBT rights, but also minority rights in Thailand, because of the assumption that we are free, that we are all right. So that's they haven't. There's an absence of a unified core for movements of any sorts, whether it is ethnic minority, religious minority, or or other groups of minorities. Yeah. So that is still a challenge for Thailand. Okay, and I'll just stop my presentation.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And this was, I think, as I said, a very unique theme, and LGBT rights, which is picking pace in many countries, including some countries in subcontinent, and India is one of those also examples. And in India case, like similar to Thailand, I think a lot of things actually happened, through the judicial intervention. Is largely the hard work of the civil society, the advocacy groups. India has a huge advocacy groups, of LGBT across different states, and thousands of them they were fighting, for this Supreme Court judgment a couple of years back, to decriminalize this entire issues of LGBT. So it happened largely because of civil society efforts, other thing. But as Jirev also said, having enacted a law and getting a judicial verdict is just starting point, because implementation and the then the wider acceptance among the majority of the society is a real struggle. And that's where I think a lot of struggle actually remains. And in India, in fact, the government in power actually has been opposing to to any kind of sort of implementation. Although it has passed the legal test, but the political process still doesn't favor. So in a sense, it's a battle, and rightly your title, it's fighting for love. so the fight must go on. Now, we don't have much time. I think only 4-5 minutes left. Finish it, and we have already exceeded the time. But nonetheless, we have 4-5 minutes to wrap this up. Any one of you have any question to anyone, so we can have a sort of 5 minutes conversation before I close it. So anyone has any comment or thoughts to share? Please spend, you are allowed to at least 1 minute to share your thoughts. Maybe a closing kind of remark or something, because I don't think we have any time for Q&A, but maybe closing thoughts. I just had one actually observation for Pradeep. I was curious to know about the Dalits. They are actually their role in the politics. Nepal is politics. Have they really made a distinction? And because they are also sizable bloc, are they able to influence the politics, or do some kind of bargaining to get their rights and other things? Is anything happening on that front?
Thank you for the question. Actually, it's not happening because the Dalit settlement is scattered. So they are living around the country, and they're not in the one place. So their population in one constituency is very low. So in terms of, for example, Madhya population is really big in the flatland within the 8 districts. Dalit population is not like that. But what major thing is, when a political party, when there is a movement happen, there's a political representation also automatically increased. But when these regressive political parties taking the leadership role, and then they couldn't bargain enough to get the more seats in a political representation, but we're trying to work with political parties, Dalit leaders, to bring together and then discuss more on this. Thank you for the questions, actually.
Okay. Any one of you have anything to share, Mr. Ganbat or Sahin? Do you have any sort of last word or observation? I'll give the Jiraud the last word to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if I have to, okay. Yeah, so I think for me, it's very interesting, listen to you all, because it's my areas of research, about South Asia anyway, and also about the minority rights, and from listening to all of you, I think it's the the our problems might be might still be the hang up from from the colonialisms that's defined us, human being, through their sexualities, to ethnicities, and through or even nationalities, and that's and that might be and that might be what's forbidden us to achieve the equal human rights for us all.
That's key. I think linking it with human rights is the key, and because this must be seen in the larger human rights space, including minority rights, whether it's LGBT or religious minority or ethnic minorities. I think it got across the year. So if anyone has anything they can say, otherwise we'll close it in next 1 or 2 minutes. We have stressed 10 minutes of the time. Yes, please.
Just, I would like to mention that even though we have a lot of differences among the Asian countries, for the academic political education is very crucial to participate in such kind of discussion on the protection of minorities, because for us, it might be in the future we will have the same kind of challenges, or I would not like to say the problems, and especially for the researchers, research institutes, very crucial to exchange our view on the maybe the same thing, because all of our countries are democratic. So again, thank you very much for the.
And thanks everyone. And